CIA agent infiltrates Burkina Faso government, but Traoré already knew everything. Michael Bennett adjusted his tie as he observed Ouagadougou through the taxi window. Burkina Faso's capital simmered under the scorching Sahel sun, a vibrant mixture of motorcycles, street vendors, and buildings of colonial and modern architecture. After 15 years serving the CIA in various West African operations, Bennett considered this his most delicate mission, infiltrating the inner circle of President Ibrahim Traoré, the young military officer who had seized power 2 years earlier and, since then, drastically redirected the country's foreign policy. "Monsieur, nous sommes arrivés," announced the taxi driver, stopping in front of the Hôtel Silmonde, a discreet establishment frequented by diplomats and businessmen. Bennett paid the fare and entered the hotel's air-conditioned lobby. At the reception, a handwritten message awaited him. "Dinner at Jardin de Koulouba, 8 p.m. Antoine." His local contact had wasted no time. In his room, Bennett secured the perimeter before unpacking his equipment disguised as ordinary objects: a fountain pen with an integrated microphone, a watch with satellite communication capabilities, and several encrypted flash drives. According to his briefing, the French departure and Russian arrival had created an intelligence vacuum that needed filling urgently. Washington wanted accurate information about Traoré's true intentions regarding mineral exploration rights, particularly uranium and gold, which had been quietly renegotiated. At 7:45 p.m., Bennett entered the restaurant located in an upscale neighborhood. Antoine Caboret, a middle-aged man with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, waved discreetly from a corner table. "Welcome to Burkina Faso, Mr. Peterson," Caboret greeted him, using Bennett's cover name. "Your credentials are impressive. The Ministry of Infrastructure Development could certainly benefit from American expertise." "I'm eager to contribute," Bennett replied, perfecting the role of an enthusiastic development consultant. "I've heard Minister Ouedraogo is receptive to international collaboration." Caboret smiled enigmatically. "Indeed. In fact, he's personally requested to meet you tomorrow. You've arrived at an interesting time, Mr. Peterson. Our young president has surprised many with his independence." "Independence is admirable," Bennett replied neutrally. "Perhaps, but it also creates new challenges when the world becomes increasingly aligned in blocks." Caboret sipped his drink. "The minister's office will send a car at 9 a.m. I recommend you get some rest." After dinner, walking back to his hotel, Bennett felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. At a corner, he discreetly glimpsed a reflection in a store window. A man in dark clothes stood under a streetlight, unabashedly observing him. Bennett continued walking, maintaining his pace. This wasn't unexpected. Counterintelligence would certainly monitor potential foreign influence. The key was to appear ordinary, transparent in his fabricated identity. As he reached his hotel, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Welcome to Ouagadougou, Mr. Bennett. Sleep well." His real name. On an encrypted phone he'd activated just hours ago. Bennett's mouth went dry. Someone knew exactly who he was before he'd even begun his mission. Standing in the hotel corridor, he made a rapid assessment of his options, all of which suddenly seemed extremely limited. The next morning, precisely at 9 a.m., a black SUV with government plates waited outside the hotel. Bennett had spent a sleepless night weighing his options. Abort the mission immediately, maintain the facade despite the compromise, or attempt to identify who had exposed him. Ultimately, the decision was made for him. His control officer had instructed him to proceed cautiously but continue gathering intelligence. The driver, a stoic man in military uniform, drove through Ouagadougou's congested streets toward the ministerial complex. Bennett maintained his cover while mentally preparing for multiple scenarios. "There's been a change in schedule, Mr. Peterson," the driver suddenly announced. "The minister sends his regrets, but President Traoré has requested your presence instead." Bennett's pulse quickened. Direct contact with the primary target on the first day was unprecedented and alarming. "I'm honored," he replied evenly, "though I wasn't prepared for such a high-level meeting." "The president values efficiency," the driver replied with a hint of pride. "He doesn't waste time with formalities." Instead of the Ministry of Infrastructure, they drove to the presidential palace, a modernist structure built during Thomas Sankora's revolutionary era. After passing through multiple security checkpoints, Bennett was escorted to a surprisingly modest office. Ibrahim Traoré sat behind a simple desk, dressed in military fatigues rather than the expected presidential suit. At 36, he projected an aura of intensity and focused intelligence that his official photographs failed to capture. "Mr. Peterson," Traoré greeted him in flawless English, standing to shake his hand. "Or should I say, Michael Bennett?" Bennett maintained his composure despite the confirmation of his worst fears. "I believe there's been some misunderstanding, Mr. President. My name is David Peterson, representing the International Development Consortium." Traoré smiled coldly and pushed a folder across the desk. "Your CIA personnel file, Mr. Bennett. Quite impressive. Operations in Nigeria, Mali, Côte d'Ivoire. Your work in destabilizing the Libyan transition government was particularly effective, though morally questionable." Bennett neither confirmed nor denied, maintaining his cover. "Mr. President, these allegations are serious and completely unfounded." "Please," Traoré waved dismissively, "let's not waste each other's time. 3 of your colleagues have already attempted to infiltrate my government in the past 18 months. You're merely the latest." He leaned forward. "The difference is that I've chosen to speak with you directly." "And why is that?" Bennett asked, abandoning the pretense but maintaining professional caution. "Because unlike your predecessors, who were quietly deported, you have a unique opportunity." Traoré fixed him with an intense gaze. "To deliver an accurate message to your superiors, rather than the distorted intelligence they typically receive." Bennett remained silent, assessing the unusual situation. "Your government believes I'm a Russian puppet," Traoré continued, "that I've merely traded French colonialism for Russian imperialism. This fundamental misunderstanding drives your misguided policies toward my country." "And what is the accurate assessment?" Bennett asked carefully. "That I am neither pro-Russian nor pro-American," Traoré replied firmly. "I am pro-Burkina Faso, and I will partner with any nation that respects our sovereignty and offers fair terms for our resources and cooperation." Bennett studied Traoré carefully, recalibrating his assessment. The CIA profile had described the young president as idealistic, but easily manipulated. The man before him projected something entirely different: calculated determination and strategic clarity. "How did you identify me?" Bennett asked, shifting to operational security concerns. "That's the question you choose to ask?" Traoré seemed amused. "Not why your intelligence on our country is so fundamentally flawed." "Professional curiosity," Bennett replied evenly. "Fair enough." Traoré nodded to an aide who had silently entered the room. The young woman placed a laptop on the desk and opened it to reveal surveillance footage. "Watch carefully." The video showed Bennett's arrival at the airport the previous day, from multiple angles, including close-ups of him using his encrypted phone. "Facial recognition technology provided by our Chinese partners," Traoré explained. "Your face triggered a match in an intelligence database shared among various non-aligned nations, a new development in our capabilities that your analysts apparently haven't noticed." Bennett's mind raced through the implications. The existence of an advanced international intelligence sharing network outside the Five Eyes and traditional Western alliances represented a significant intelligence failure. "But identifying you was merely step 1, Traoré continued. "More interesting was confirming why you were sent." He slid another folder across the desk. "Operation Sahel Sunrise. Your mission parameters." Bennett maintained his composure but inwardly reeled. The document contained detailed information about his assignment, information only his direct superiors at Langley should have had access to. "You have a leak," Bennett stated flatly. "Or perhaps we have better friends than you realize," Traoré countered. "The world is changing, Mr. Bennett. The monopoly on advanced intelligence capabilities your country once enjoyed is eroding rapidly." Bennett remained silent, processing the strategic implications. "But I didn't bring you here to gloat," Traoré said, his tone shifting. "I brought you here because I need you to deliver an accurate message to Washington." He stood and walked to a large map of Burkina Faso on the wall. "My country faces an existential threat from jihadist insurgents. These groups have displaced nearly 2 million of my people and control significant territory in the north." He turned back to Bennett. The Russians provided immediate military support when we needed it most, while your country lectured us about democracy and human rights, while our citizens were being massacred. Our concerns about Russian influence, Bennett began, are based on Cold War thinking that ignores the reality on the ground, Traoré interrupted firmly. I don't want Russian permanent bases any more than I want American ones, but I needed immediate military support, and they provided it without condition. Bennett recognized an opportunity to gather valuable intelligence. And now? Now, Traoré said, returning to his seat, I want balanced international partnerships, but that requires honest brokers who understand our actual priorities, not imagined ones. Rain began to patter against the windows of the presidential office, bringing a temporary respite from the heat. Bennett evaluated his options carefully. Standard protocol dictated maintaining cover regardless of exposure, but this situation had evolved far beyond standard parameters. Let's assume I believe you, Bennett said cautiously. What exactly do you propose? Traoré leaned back in his chair. A recalibration of American policy toward Burkina Faso, based on actual intelligence rather than outdated assumptions. I'm offering you unprecedented access to understand our government's true position. In exchange for? Delivering an accurate assessment to your superiors and potentially opening channels for cooperation in areas of mutual interest. Bennett considered the extraordinary proposal. Most would simply deport me. Most lack strategic vision, Traoré replied. Expelling you solves nothing. Another would replace you, equally misinformed. I've studied your file carefully, Mr. Bennett. You're experienced enough to recognize valuable intelligence when you see it, and senior enough for your assessment to carry weight. The president pressed a button on his desk. A different aide entered, carrying a thick binder. This contains documentation of our actual agreements with Russia, China, and Turkey, not the exaggerated versions your intelligence services have constructed. You'll find they're predominantly commercial, not military, with termination clauses we fully intend to enforce if terms aren't met. Bennett glanced at the binder but didn't reach for it. Why would you share sensitive agreements? Because they aren't what your government fears they are, Traoré answered simply. And because transparency serves my purposes better than secrecy in this instant. And if I refuse your proposal? Then you'll be quietly deported tomorrow, officially for visa irregularities. No diplomatic incident, no publicity. And your replacement will face the same fundamental challenge, operating on flawed intelligence. Thunder rumbled outside as Bennett weighed the unusual proposition. His training emphasized maintaining operational security at all costs, but adaptability was equally important. If Traoré's assertions about intelligence sharing between non-aligned states were accurate, it represented a critical development Washington needed to understand. I would need verification, Bennett said finally, and freedom to form my own assessment. Naturally, Traoré nodded. I'm not asking you to become my advocate. I'm asking you to be an honest observer. For the next 2 weeks, you'll have access to cabinet meetings, military briefings, and economic planning sessions. Your official cover as a development consultant will be maintained publicly. And my actual identity? Known only to me and my closest security advisors. Your movement will be monitored, of course, but you'll have appropriate operational freedom. Consider it a unique opportunity to fulfill your actual mission more effectively than your agency imagined possible. Bennett had navigated complex situations throughout his career, but never one quite like this. The standard playbook offered no guidance for when the target not only identified you, but invited you to observe their operation from within. I accept your proposal, Bennett finally said, with the understanding that I'll report my genuine findings, not what you might wish to hear. I would expect nothing less, Traoré replied with a slight smile. Your integrity is precisely why I've taken this unusual approach. 2 weeks later, Bennett sat in a secure communication room beneath the American embassy, facing a skeptical audience on screens before him. The deputy director for African operations, his direct superior, and analysts from various departments listened with expressions ranging from disbelief to intense interest. To summarize, Bennett concluded after his detailed briefing, President Traoré's government is pursuing a genuinely non-aligned foreign policy. Their agreements with Russia are pragmatic and limited, focused on immediate security needs rather than strategic alignment. Similarly, their economic arrangements with China are transactional, with significant safeguards for Burkinabe interests. This contradicts multiple intelligence assessments, the deputy director noted critically. Yes, sir, it does, Bennett acknowledged, because those assessments were based on flawed assumptions and outdated frameworks. The reality on the ground is considerably more nuanced. And you're certain your observations weren't manipulated? That you weren't shown exactly what they wanted you to see? His superior pressed. I applied standard counter-deception protocols throughout, Bennett replied confidently. Cross-referenced observations with multiple sources, including opposition figures Traoré's government facilitated access to. The consistency of the evidence is compelling. So what's your final assessment? The deputy director asked after a long pause. That our current approach is counterproductive. We're treating Burkina Faso as lost to Russian influence when it's actually pursuing independence from all external powers. This creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more we isolate them based on perceived Russian ties, the more dependent on Russian support they become. The ensuing discussion was vigorous, with analysts challenging specific points and Bennett defending his assessment with methodical evidence. Eventually, a consensus emerged that a policy recalibration merited serious consideration. After the secure call ended, Bennett left the embassy, walking through Ouagadougou's vibrant evening streets, toward a small cafe where he had arranged his final meeting with Traoré. The president was already waiting, dressed in civilian clothes and accompanied by a single security officer who maintained a discreet distance. Your flight leaves tomorrow morning, Traoré observed as Bennett sat down. Have you delivered your message? I've delivered my assessment, Bennett corrected. Based on what I've observed, not what you might have wanted me to say. Traoré smiled. And what was your conclusion, if I may ask? That you're playing a dangerous but sophisticated game of balancing powers. That your primary loyalty is to your country's sovereignty, not to any external patron. And that American policy needs recalibration. Accurate, Traoré acknowledged, though I prefer to call it principled pragmatism rather than a game. The outcome remains uncertain, Bennett noted. Balancing Russia, China, and potentially America while combating an insurgency would challenge even the most established governments. We're under no illusions about the difficulties, Traoré replied seriously. But difficulty doesn't make it the wrong path. As they spoke, Bennett reflected on how his understanding of Burkina Faso's situation had evolved. The simplistic narratives of great power competition failed to capture the legitimate aspirations of nations determined to chart their own course. Whatever policies my government ultimately adopts, Bennett said, I believe they'll be based on a more accurate understanding of your position now. That's all I asked for, Traoré said, extending his hand. Fair assessment, not guaranteed support. As they shook hands, Bennett recognized that in this unconventional encounter, both had achieved their objective. He had gathered intelligence of exceptional value, while Traoré had opened a channel for potential recalibration of American policy. One last question, Bennett said. How did you know I'd deliver an honest assessment rather than telling my superiors what they expected to hear? Your file, Traoré replied with a knowing smile. It showed a pattern of intellectual honesty, even when politically inconvenient. In my experience, Mr. Bennett, that quality is far rarer and more valuable than any technical skill. Bennett nodded thoughtfully. In the complex world of intelligence, sometimes the most valuable asset wasn't technology or tradecraft, but the simple commitment to seeing reality clearly, even when it contradicted comfortable assumptions.